Thank you, everybody. Let's get this meeting with the Board of Education started. We'll call to order at 7:11. If everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We start out by thanking everybody for coming to a special meeting. Wish it wasn't necessary, but it is. I do appreciate your time. Our first item on the agenda, thank you, is public participation. The 2-minute limit. Members of the Tolland Board of Education welcome the members of the public to share their thoughts and ideas at this time. When appropriate to do so, members of the board and the administration may respond to comments during
I'm just loading the time.
points of information.
Sorry.
That's okay. You have to overcome. In consideration of those in attendance and in an effort to proceed in a timely manner, follow-up discussion may need to take place outside of the meeting setting. We will alternate for those in the room. Please raise your hand. Those online, raise your virtual hand. I will alternate between the two. As always, please start with your name and address for the minutes. Yes.
Hi, good evening. Mary Rose DeBerrick, 37 Ryan Road. I want to thank you for your hard work on this budget and the whole budget process. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I realize that you spend countless and thankless hours working on the budget. And in the end, it's for Tolland's children. This process brings out the ugly in this town. I think it's time to revisit the social media policy for our elected officials. How can we expect our children to be responsible with social media when adults behave in the ways that we see on our town pages? I've been accused of attacking children online after a private virtual conversation with someone I disagree with on the budget. As a vice president of the boosters, I take that accusation seriously, and it's extremely damaging for the hours I spend. Thank you.
Would anybody online like to speak? Anybody online? All right. Seeing none, we'll close public participation. New business, the budget adjustments. Dr. Will.
So, as you know, in the last town council meeting, a reduction of 56,000 for the overall budget, 27,000 for the town, 20,000, 7,000 for the board was decided upon. What I did was put together for the board, put together basically, kind of a running record of what you had. If you scroll down in the document that I posted for you, you've got the previous iterations of referendum. You have the May 7th referendum and the budget that was presented at that point. You have the May 21st referendum, same thing, information that was presented at that point. You have the general town adjustments, and then the total amount that's being reduced from board of town. Then at the very top, kind of working from the bottom all the way to the top, you have the budget, the percentage, and the reduction amount. Recommendation for boards to chew on is that you could use 21,403 more of the ERF, which would bring the ERF to about 178,384. I don't know. I don't think we're going to end this year with a lot of money to transfer to the ERF, but let's say we ended somewhere in the $0 to $100,000 range. You could request that that get transferred to the ERF, so that ERF number could go above 200 again at the end of the year. Just a couple, maybe 50,000 got transferred, something like that. It would be above 200 again. So we used 21,403 of the ERF, and then we did go through insurance and we had a savings in our cyber insurance. That's our liability coverage, and so that was about 5,597 that I could find between the last meeting and this one in the insurance lines. So together that would make the 27,000 that you have to adjust. So throwing it out there for your your conversation, deliberation, see what you thought of it, and then anything else, whatever you want me to do.
That being said, may I open up the floor? Board members like to speak?
What is the percentage if you included the 650?
The 649, that's about 1.4%.
So that
So
is
353 would be 4.93.
4 so it's
something like that. So
truly a 4.9 if you include that.
4.93. It would be like, if you're gonna have USEF in there, it'd be a 4.93 if USEF was in the board budget. If it's out of the board budget and moved to debt, which I believe is appropriate since it's principal and interest. Town would also be moving it, their part of it to, to debt, is principal and interest. So if we move the principal and interest out, as we've had, planned in the past, then it would be 3.5.
Thank you.
Good question.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Just because we made the point about USIP. And I think it's getting confused for the community at certain points. Though I think, first, just to mention, we've been upfront about it the whole time. If I pull out our first budget, we highlighted that it was a 6.35 without moving the debt and a 4.84 with moving the debt. That's right, okay. So I just want to point out that if we're going to say that it's really, about a 5% because we're getting to now keep that money in our budget and not use it to pay off debt, then we should also consider the flip side of that, which is that we paid this debt out of our budget for 10 years at $649,000, which is roughly $6.5 million. We had a 1.7% average over 11 years. If you're going to count the debt this way on this side to make the number look like a 5%, we should also look at it from the other side, and that we had a much lower percentage than 1.7% if you take another $6.5 million out of it. So you can't decide to count it one way now in town and then not flip that and count it the same way moving forward.
Clarification. We are not moving the debt and keeping the money. We're not.
No, but
The debt is moving and our request dropped because we don't.
right, so it's not like you're taking the 640, moving it out, keeping the 640 and spending the 640 on other things. That 640 was moving to debt, where it always,
The town just won't give us that because we're.
yeah, it's, right, and to the point that Ms. Gouchin's making, and I believe this, this was a well-intentioned thing many years ago that went seriously awry in so many ways. You don't have enough time for me to cover, but if you ever want to have a meeting about how many ways that went awry, I'd be happy to report out on that. Having said that, local boards of ed are not supposed to have principal and interest. That's where this kind of ended. That's why this needs to be moved over to debt now. There is no Honeywell project. None of that exists anymore. It's appropriate. And your budgets would have been less, and what budgets would have been less, but minus that over the years that you not have that.
So that is it.
I get the word tweaking, but I think that's also what's happening online. It's the word tweaking that's being made to look a certain way. So I just wanted to also point out that if you take that out of our budget over 10 years, it's a less than a 1.7%.
Do you have a thought on the current production?
I think that we should do whatever possible to not take away any more programs and stuff. I am happy with this plan, or unless anybody else has any other suggestions that also does not take away.
I'm okay with this moving forward.
I'll second that. I much prefer this. I don't like seeing more and more coming out of here. Again, much prefer it over losing more staff and programs. So we're at a point right now where it feels like our hands are tied as a board. It's a tough position to be in. It's frustrating, but this is where we're at. So I think I would second what was said just now, with supporting Dr. Bullock's recommendations here.
So currently, and just make sure, my math is looking right. If we went with this, for this budget, we'd be pulling 50 out of the ERF. You're looking at.
Yeah, yes, this 50, to make that 50, make the, you're about 130 plus now 21. So
Learn the new math.
There's a lot of stuff. You gotta use it.
You gotta wait for the tutorial to show. So we'd be pulling out about 150,000, leaving 578 and some change in there. What did we pull out last? Round
You
number.
utilized, gosh, it would be, we utilized this chunk for special ed, this chunk for special ed transport and the ERF, probably 300. So it was a big chunk. But you had some nominal years that allowed for that. Two chunks out less. I can hold that in a minute.
Yeah, I'm curious, was that
I
trend?
can give it to you. Give me like 2 minutes.
I think just what Walt is sort of saying is we, during COVID, there was extra money that we had available to us. And there was the expenses were lower when kids weren't going to school. There was a bigger surplus, which was completely unexpected because of the events that happened. It wasn't because of poor budgeting or anything. So I think what I'm saying is I agree with him that there was a bigger amount that was able to be transferred because it transferred in, and therefore we were able to utilize that just because of the circumstances of the day back. And I would like to just clarify, I only asked that question because we've always had kind of the two numbers in terms of what was it with and what was it without. And that's the reason I was asking, just so that we can be consistent.
Absolutely.
And so the cyber insurance savings, that's a part of our overall insurance bill. Yeah. And my assumption is that the advisors or the company came back and decreased our bill by that time.
Yeah, and it's the actionable thing I could do in the timeline with respect to insurance. It's the actionable thing. You know, the rest of it, we have to talk more about. Which will be longer term.
Any other questions? Jay, you really look like wheels are turning.
No, I bet. I keep going back to the fact that we're gonna be starting next year with this sum of items, sort of excluded from the budget. Yeah, frustrating that is, considering we didn't need to lose any of it, but I think that narrative, online and getting it cleared up in the board right now is very important for everybody, whether watching, whether typing, on social media, or whether sitting in this room. And so, it was mostly just that. It was mostly just, it pains me to see this many things taken out of ERF when this was not the route we had to go. So, not just as a board, but as a town. So, that's.
I have the figures for it. In the last round here, budget technology initiative, 227,558. In special education, transportation and others, 273, 173. So you had,
This was the last.
last budget.
So this current year,
This current year has that chunk,
wow.
funded those two chunks to offset. Then you did transfer back 172.5, which was your most recent.
Notice.
Those two things left 157, you transferred back 172, that left you with the 329, and now you're in that it's mitigating.
Speak, yeah. So I guess just hearing those numbers, do we feel, because we're not even gonna be at even, well, I guess if you say we're gonna add a couple funds back in, whether it be, we'll just say 50,000 back in, we'll be around the 225. Do you feel safe that that's a safe number to roll the dice with moving into the next budget year? Or is that, on the lower end that you would prefer?
Well, given the
Not
circumstances, I would say it's a reasonable way to end the year.
Okay. To 225 potentially heading into next year on the lower end, and if we put 80,000 in, then we'll be a little bit higher because of 250.
And special ed coming back with excess cost in May, you'll see that reflected in the June report for May. Put us up in the data, we're probably gonna be somewhere in the 0 to 100,000, so we'll probably have something to transfer over. So that, I'm pretty confident we didn't.
So Dan, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'd like to hear from, see, what are your thoughts on that?
Dr. Willett kind of just answered my my thought process there. I was curious to see, obviously, because at the end of May, I knew that this excess funds would be coming in the final 25%. So I was just seeing if there might be an update on that. It seems like there's a fair amount coming out of ERF. Obviously, it's not what we wanted, in my opinion, obviously, but I think it's the best route going forward, in my personal opinion. Just trying to stay away from obviously any programs or staffing reductions, but it's a small chunk out of the larger dollar amount that we've already taken. So I think it's relatively safe moving forward from this standpoint, with some additional funds expected to come in next month.
Thank you, Dan. One more time. Anybody?
I don't know if it's the time. But I do, it's not necessarily for now, but I do have a question regarding the budget. So I know there's been people speaking to me privately, and then also some chatter amongst the community pages about the busing. Not about the contract itself, I understand that's another can of worms, but I'm just speaking about, like, do the routes themselves get rerun per year based on what kids and what routes, and how does that work in regards to the pricing that we get, or is it still a flat pricing no matter what the routes are? Say they have less routes or less stops and use less time for the bus transportation, are they still charging us, say, $100? Or if we, if there's a less route for this particular bus cycle, they're not using as much fuel or labor and whatnot, do they charge us $95, or is it just a flat fee?
It's a cost per bus. So what happens is you can reduce the number of buses. There usually will be something that, because the contract is set on, what they expect to be providing for services. If you do, they ding you a little for reducing, mid-contract.
Yes,
Having said that, one of the objectives of the prior board was to not have the runs be, not have the runs function the way they had in the past, because kids were coming, home later.
yeah,
So one of the objectives of the previous board was to make that stop. So we went to out for a bid for a plan that would make that stop, and we have. There's been a lot of late buses at this point compared to the previous years.
yes,
But that was the objective of the contract. It would have gone up anyway because everything went up, but that was one of the objectives. Also getting the tracking. So now parents can see exactly where, most of the time, the first view, they see exactly where the buses are. Those were all objectives of the previous board.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what we have. Now, having said that, by law, we have to provide transportation for
No, I
kids in school,
understand that.
and that's why sometimes people will see a bus go by, like a high school bus with only half filled.
yeah, no, I do as well, yes.
Because you have to be able to provide it for, let's say Mr. Willett lost his job and then couldn't drive the kids anymore. That next day, that bus has to be able to pick up Mr. Willett's kids.
And that's the distinction that I've seen in some of the communication. Even though Mr. Willett's kid may never use the bus,
Yes,
by statute, we have to have that capability to get to. So we have X number of kids that are gonna need transportation, whether they want to use it or not. We have to have the capability to provide.
No, I understand. I'm not pro or con bus. I'm just, people are just, it's just, there's chatter, people coming to me. I'm just trying. I was not here on that board and nearly half the people in this room or on this board currently were here during that contract. So I'm just trying to gather some data from my own sense of people that are speaking.
That entire contract is there on the dashboard too.
You know, yeah,
I forget what date, it's August or something.
Yeah, I had asked you a few
Yeah,
weeks back.
so July 26th and then August 9th. I think you'll find that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
August 9th would be the last.
I think too, and I think this is what you're saying, like, what I always think about is, you know, my son, he takes the bus to and from school every single day, my middle schooler, except now it's baseball season. So I'm driving him to school because he's got his giant baseball bag as well, and he's not taking the bus home because he has practice or a game every day. So I think too, like, it also, it's not just like, in, you know, my other son's car, you know, was in an accident, so he had to start taking the bus. Yeah, that's a one-off, but I also think you have, when you have sports, especially in the spring, a lot less kids are on the bus during that time, but the bus still needs to be able to take them to school in the fall and the winter.
But to go into a little bit of your earlier question, yes, at the beginning of the year, right before the beginning of the year, the district and the bus companies get together. They look at the routes, they look at how busy the buses are gonna be, and they redo that recipe.
All right.
So, you know, the bus that our kids are on this year is probably not gonna be the one that they're on next year, and the routes are changing, so, but they do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's recalculated every year.
I don't want to take too much time with it. Well, we can talk further with it. Thank you.
Any other? Bill, did you have any comments? I saw you just joined. Do you have any comments on the recommendation for adjustment?
I literally in the last 30 seconds just logged in, so I don't have anything to add at this point.
That being said, I will entertain a motion to move this to board action. Second. Any discussion? All right, then we shall vote. Jaden. Rainey.
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
And I, Jen.
Aye.
Katie.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Dana. Dana. Dan.
Aye.
Last, Dana. Motion passes. Dr. Willett, if we could move that to board action. Which is now. Right up on it. All right, so I will entertain a motion for adjustment to the budget.
So moved. Adjustment to the budget
As proposed.
as proposed.
Second. Discussion.
I just want to state that, you know, again, I think that it's great that we're all on the same page. I'm sure we all have different reasonings, you know, as Jane just pointed out. The choices are not necessarily ideal, and we may all come from different places, and some of these choices aren't ideal. But I think that we're all on the same page, that we're trying to minimize, you know, the impacts to the students as much as possible. So I'm just really grateful that we're able to come together, make some hard decisions, but not make it hard on us or others while we make those decisions.
And that's a good point, and I appreciate the questions that have been here. I appreciate the discussion, you know, that we've had this year, but all the way through. You know, we've had to come up with some conversations as far as how we adjust. Some of them we were able to do without significant reductions to staff, some of them we weren't. But all the way through, I'm absolutely certain that the 9 of us, everyone had the best intentions of the children in mind. And regardless of what what the budget number, turns out to be. I firmly believe that the 9 of us are gonna spend the next year doing everything we can to make sure our education is still spectacular and amazing. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it for these kids. We will be there. Any other comments? All right. Then let's vote. Jaden. Aye. Greenie.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Aye. Jen.
Aye.
Katie.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Dana. Dan.
Aye.
And one more time, Dana. All right, motion passes. Dr. Willett, if you could, when you get the chance, adjust what's on the webpage. All right. Moving on to executive session. Would entertain a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of superintendent evaluation